So great to be with you this morning. I want to talk to you today about my dream and how I gave up on it. Have you ever had a dream where you thought, hey, this is going to be great, I'm really going to do this, I'm going to get everything into it, and then after you think about it for a while, you think, well, that was a really stupid idea. Where did I get that idea from? Well, I'm originally from Australia. Grew up in the outback of Australia. My dad's a bush pilot, and so as a young kid, flew all over the outback with my dad, but came to the U.S. In the 70s to go to college. Came all the way from the outback of Australia to the cornfields of Indiana. So you can imagine the culture shock that I went through. But when I was going to that little college, I got a dream. God put it on my heart that I should make movies. What an audacious dream for a young kid. But he told me that one day I'd be making movies with a message. Now, back in the 70s, Hollywood didn't want to have anything to do with those kind of movies, especially Christian movies. They didn't even want to have anything to do with family movies back then. But I had this dream that I was going to make those kind of movies. In the early 90s, we made our first little movie. It was a family film called Making Waves. We thought, this is it. This is going to get us on our track to making these kind of message movies. Nobody wanted it. We couldn't get distribution for nothing. Nobody wanted a family movie, you know. Hollywood wanted R-rated, you know, those kind of movies, and they didn't want anything that was G-rated or maybe PG-rated. And so I thought, well, I'm going to keep at this. Time after time after time, I kept hitting my head against a brick wall. And so I stopped. I actually said to God, I'm not going to do this anymore. It was a stupid idea. I'm done. I'm getting out of the business. I'm going to sell my business. Well, a very interesting thing happened. Have you ever had a divine appointment? That's something that happens to you that when you look back, you can say, well, that certainly wasn't a coincidence. Something's going on here. You know, God put me in a specific place. And I did a seminar at my studio up in Orlando for a bunch of churches, and some people were there. And I met some guys from a little church in Albany, Georgia, called Sherwood Baptist Church. And they handed me a little movie that they'd made in the church. It was called Flywheel. Has anybody ever seen the movie Flywheel? You've probably never seen it. I see one hand, yeah. They had made this little movie for $30,000 in their church. They actually went to Best Buy and bought a little camera, shot the movie, and then took it back to Best Buy and got their money back. Well, they handed me this movie and they said, we just made this movie. We'd love for you to see it because we want you to help us make the next movie. And I thought, okay, thanks. And I shook their hand and put them on the bus, and off they went. And I turned to my staff and I said, I'm going to put this movie in, but it's a church that made it for $30,000. It's going to be really bad. And I said, we'll just watch a couple of minutes, but we'll turn it off. So we put the movie in. We watched the first couple of minutes, and the production was terrible. You couldn't hear the sound. There was no lighting. The acting was just ridiculous. But we watched the next 10 minutes. We watched the next 30 minutes. We couldn't turn it off. The story was so good that we watched the entire movie. All my staff were coming in, sitting on the floor watching the movie. Got to the end of the movie, and we thought, this is amazing. This little church made this for $30,000. I got to call these guys. So I called them back and I said, you know, you guys don't know how to make a movie, but you know how to write a movie. So I said, if you ever want to do another one, give me a call. I'll love to come up and help you. So about 6 months later, they called me about this movie. Anybody seen Facing the Giants? They had a script, and they sent me the script, and they said, you know, we came up with this idea. We have a school with a football team, and we don't have any money, but we think we can make this. Will you come and help us make this movie? And I said, okay, here's the key. Because of the movie you made before that just had terrible production value, you have to have a real director of photography. That's the main cameraman. You got to have a real sound guy because the sound was terrible on their first movie. And you have to have a gaffer. That's the lighting director on the movie because they didn't have any lighting in that first movie. So I said, I'll bring my crew up and we'll help you make this movie. And I said, but I got to pay them, so what's your budget? Dead silence. I thought the phone had dropped out. You know, I'm going, hello, hello. And they said, well, we don't have any budget. We're a church. You know, will you come and do this for free? I said, well, let me see. It's about a 6-week shoot. I didn't even know there was in Albany, Georgia, so I didn't know how to get there. But I said, let me call my friends and see if I can talk them into this. So I took the screenplay, which is a pretty good story, pretty good screenplay, and I sent it to my friends, the DP and the sound man and the gaffer, and I didn't tell them that there was no budget. I just sent them the script. And I said, here's a great story, a little church making this. This is a great project we can work on. You know, read the script. So they read the script. They called me back, oh, this is really great. We'd love to be a part of this. And I was very shrewd. I said to them, have you ever been on a mission trip? They said no. I said, we're going on a mission trip to Albany, Georgia. We're going to go up and help these guys make this little movie. And so we went up for 6 weeks, had about 500 volunteers, and they didn't know what they were doing, but we formed them in departments and we showed them what they could touch and what they couldn't touch. I was afraid they were going to kill themselves with some of the things. And we made this movie. Well, we went up there and we just had a blast with them. 6 weeks of shoot. Every day we saw miracles happen. It was amazing. When they needed something, they would pray for it and it would just happen. When we first started, in fact, we knew we had to shoot all this football stuff at night on their field, and they didn't have real strong lights on the field, and so we tested it with our cameras, and it was pretty dark. So I said to the team at the church, you know, we need to get a big 12,000 watt light and put it in a Condor, one of those high reach machines, so that when we shoot the night football scenes, we'll be able to actually see stuff. Well, they said, well, we can't afford that. And there aren't any of those Condors in town. We don't know where we're going to get that. So I said, well, let's start praying for it. So at the start of the shoot, we started praying for the Condor. And we had about 4 weeks before we needed to shoot those scenes. Every day they would pray for the Condor. And every day I'd ask them, do you have anything? Nope, we haven't heard anything. Well, we got into the 3rd week, about halfway the 3rd week, was still no Condor, nothing turned up. And I started to think, well, we're going to have to fashion something. We have to build scaffolding. You know, I started to think it out for God. I figured God's not going to come through here, so I got to figure this out. And we had all these crazy plans of how we were going to get this light up really high to get the football scene lit. Every day they're praying for the Condor. Comes to the very day that we had to shoot those scenes. We came in late because we were going to shoot all night. So we came in about noon, and then we're going to shoot till about 2 or 3 in the morning. And I turn up on set, and there's a Condor sitting there. And I said, where did that come from? And they said, well, this guy just drove up with a truck, had that on a trailer. He has a construction business a couple of towns over, and he said, I hear you guys are making a movie. Do you need this? I don't need it for a couple of weeks. Here's the keys. They prayed for the Condor, and it turned up on the very day we needed it. I was getting kind of worried. I was trying to rethink it for God, but he had it all planned out, and it turned up at exactly the right time. And those things happened day after day after day when we were making this little movie. Well, it came out in the fall of '06. And everybody was hoping that it would at least make its money back. Well, it did far better than that. It did $10.1 million at the box office. It went on around the world into DVDs. I think so far it's made like $60 million. Totally amazing for a little Christian film that I thought nobody would ever touch in Hollywood, and now all of a sudden the door was just opened a crack, you know, for these kind of films. So Sony came back to me and said, that was a pretty good experience. We made some good money there. Let's do that again. So we said, okay. So we went back to the church and we said, what do you got? Let's do another one. So they came up with this one. Who's seen Fireproof? Anybody seen Fireproof? So they came up with a great story. In fact, initially we were going to make a totally different movie called Finding the Rock, which is kind of a father and son story, and we were actually in pre-production for it, and they stopped everything and they said, guys, we really feel the Lord has put on our hearts to do something about marriage. We don't know what it is yet, but we're going to stop what you're doing there on that Finding the Rock movie, and we don't even know what to call it yet, but we're going to do something about marriage. So they got to working and they wrote a new screenplay, and they called it Fireproof. Amazing things happen. In fact, that movie, Fireproof, has now gone around the world and made, I think, about $100 million. It's amazing how that movie has touched a core with people. Do you know that that movie, it's been documented that it's saved over 1 million marriages? How incredible is that? The church has got so many emails. In fact, when the movie came out, the very night it came out, they got so many emails it blew up their email system. They had to create a whole new system because they weren't ready for the inflow of people saying, I've got a problem in my marriage, what do I do? In fact, I heard about a screening somewhere in the Midwest where when the movie finished and the credits were rolling, a big strapping guy got up in the middle of the theater and he said, you just saw my life on stage. That was my life. I'm a firefighter and I'm going through a divorce. I need somebody to pray for me right now. Where have you ever seen that happen in a movie theater? And that happened time and time again. People were so touched by the movie, it came out at exactly the right time when people needed that story. And that was totally a God thing, that He would change the plan that we were going to make, give us this plan to make a movie about marriage, and it would come out right at the right time. So unbeknownst to me, my dream was slowly, coming to fruition, even though I had backed off on my dream. I said to God, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to sell my business. It was a stupid idea anyway. I'm done with this idea. You see what happened? I had to get out of the way so God could say, now let me show you what I can do. I was trying to do it myself, and I wasn't getting anywhere. But as soon as I got out of the way, then God showed me what He could do, and He started to open the door for these movies. Now, those two movies have created a whole new genre in Hollywood called faith-based films that was never there before. In fact, when we made Facing the Giants back in 2004 and 2005, that was the only Christian film that came out that year. The door has been opened now because Hollywood sees that they can make money at these things. They're making more and more of them. I think this year there was 10 or 12 Christian movies that came out, or I should say last year, 13. Who knows what's going to happen this year? God has opened the door. He engineered a way that Hollywood would see, hey, we can make money at this. They actually came to us and said, we don't understand why these movies are making money. They called it an underserved audience. They said, hey, Christians are going to see movies. We better make movies for them. And now you're seeing more and more of these movies coming out every day. There's churches, there's groups popping up. We've made some movies since then. You've probably seen Courageous. Anybody seen Courageous? That was the next one in the series that the church made. We made a little movie 2 years ago called Letters to God, a true story about a little boy going through cancer who was writing letters and putting them in the mail to his best friend God and addressing them to God. But the mailman knew that he was going through cancer, and he took the letters. He couldn't take them to the post office and put them in what they call the undeliverables bin, because that's really where they get shredded. So the mailman kept the letters. This actually happened in Nashville. He kept the letters because he didn't know what to do with them, and he was a drunkard. He was an alcoholic, and he didn't know what to do with the letters. So he finally started reading the letters, and he saw that the little boy wasn't asking God for anything for himself, but he was asking for his family and everybody in the community and how to deal with him going through cancer. It so touched the mailman that he got his life turned around. Stopped drinking, totally changed his life. The letters of that little boy changed the entire community. So we made that little movie about 3 years ago, and it's gone on around the world, and we continue to do that. But do you see how God has engineered a plan to take this medium, such a powerful medium? Movies have a way that they touch people in no other way. It's an interesting thing that happens when people go to watch a movie. They let down their guard. They sit in a dark room with 100 strangers, and they're totally mesmerized by the flickering images on the silver screen. And unlike when they might go to church or they go hear about faith where they put up a wall, when they go to see movies, they drop that wall. And movies have an ability to touch your heart. And so God has used that now to touch millions of people around the world with these movies. It's an amazing medium that I've been privileged to be a part of. It wasn't anything I did. Totally God engineered the whole plan so that we could make these movies. And we continue to make these movies. And you know, everybody asks me one question. What's the most important component to making these movies? Because when the church came to me first and they gave me that first little $30,000 movie, and we watched it and they said, will you help us make another movie? And I said, well, you got to have a great sound man, you got to have a great cameraman, you got to have a great lighting man. You know, and so everybody says, is that it? Is it the story? Is it the music? Is it the camera work? Maybe it's the actors. You got to have really good actors. You know, Kirk Cameron really made Fireproof because everybody else in that movie were just church people that had never been in a movie, but he kind of elevated everybody up to his level. So maybe it was Kirk Cameron though. Well, I always say the most important component in all these movies is prayer. That's what's made these movies. It's not the actors, it's not the story, it's not the camera work, it's not the music. What we do is we bathe these projects in prayer. Right from the very beginning. We actually have a group of individuals on set called the Prayer Warriors. And they're 4 or 5 people that come on set every day. They don't know anything about making movies, but they know how to pray. And I give them the script. And I go over to them every morning when we're shooting and I say, now here's the scene that we're shooting today. And it's a really difficult scene, so really pray for the actors that they can pull this off and that the technology works and that the lighting works. And when they hear me yell action, they go into action and they start praying. Sometimes we have to have them offset so they don't make noise for the audio. So they listen on the radio and if we're shooting in a room like this, they're outside the building and they'll hear on the radio action and they start praying. And then when they hear me yell cut, they stop praying and they're ready for the next one. That's what really was the most important component. That's what's made these movies successful. We could have made the best movies in the world. We could have had the best actors, we could have had the best camera work, and they would have fallen flat because our timing wasn't right. You know, God held us off for a whole year with Facing the Giants. When we were frustrated, why can't we get this movie finished? But He held us off to exactly the right time when The Passion had made $640 million. And that's when Hollywood said, okay, we'll take your little $80,000 movie and we'll put $4 million into it to get it into the theaters. That was because of the prayer. And we were going to make a whole nother movie than Fireproof. But God said, no, I want you to make something about marriage. That was because of the prayer. And that's continued all the way through. So that's the most important component to all these movies we make. So, as you can see, my dream's been realized. I didn't even realize it happening when it was actually happening. But I had to get out of the way, and God said, okay, now let me show you what I can do. And He went far beyond what I could ever dream or ever engineer or ever put together. He took just what we could do. We just showed up. I mean, literally, we had 500 volunteers from a little church. They'd never shot movies before. They didn't know what they were doing, but every day for 6 weeks, they took their vacation, they took time off work, they figured it out on how they could turn up every day for 6 weeks just to make this little movie. We didn't even know where it was going to go, but they showed up, and then God took it and did amazing things with it.